we grow. We don't think about it. But actually the purpose, for those of us who have thought about it, the purpose of our life is to grow. And to grow in ways that we haven't maybe even explored. And that's what that time was when I went to India. So what did I talk to the Beatles about? We talked they were exactly like friends I'd had who were musicians and from Connecticut. They were the same. And they had the same dreams and the same fears and the same ideas that all my friends had had. So I felt completely comfortable. Now the two that I'm talking about are John and George. So what happened is that when the first questions that we asked each other in the 60s, like, how are you surviving? It wasn't like, isn't the weather wonderful? Isn't this a pretty city? It was like, how are you surviving? How do you see it? Do you see a way out? Or what do you think is going to happen next? Where are we going? All those kinds of questions were the questions we asked each other. And it was just a short period where we were thrown together because of those different events. And then a lot of us found the answer, we felt, and we went on to live our lives. But during that time, I would meet anybody, and immediately we would just cut to the chase, like, are you making it? Are you okay? What do you think? How are you describing all this? So when I met John and George, who were slightly different than Paul and Ringo, who didn't come for the course. Paul and Ringo did not come for the course. They still meditate, they raise money, so kids that are at risk can meditate, but they weren't interested in that, complete immersion that we were going through, or we were heading into. And so, so John and George were like friends I'd had, and of course George right away said, what brought you here? I heard you teach yoga. Tell me about your experiences. And then I would tell them all about all kinds of experiences. And I'd say, now tell me about yours. And I wish I could remember. I think life has turned that off. And maybe it's his private area and somehow it's been cut off. It could be Alzheimer's. No, it's not accessible to me. Except that I remember him saying and describing the trip as blowing his mind and changing his whole life. And that from that moment on, he, like me, like a lot of us, decided there was nothing more important than bringing this out to the rest of us, than helping people grow to be more. The thing about yoga and its meditation, which is what TM is it was considered the first martial art, the earliest martial art. And the martial arts are about mastering yourself through different skill sets or whatever. And the same with yoga. It's about controlling your mind so that you can determine your own destiny, but also making you a better person, less dysfunctional. I mean, we are all animals, aren't we? We are. And you take any animal, if it's threatened, it's dangerous. Even the sweetest little kitten, it becomes dangerous. And we become dangerous when we're threatened. When our minds are not what they can be, meaning that they haven't gone deep and connected with a part of themselves that's transcendental, then they're shallow. And just like anything that's shallow, it can be easily uprooted, it can be easily overshadowed, and that means that person, that mind, then becomes vulnerable. And when it becomes vulnerable, doesn't make good decisions, becomes jealous, becomes angry, becomes fearful, anxious. So this technique, which I do, and I know you're here to hear about the Beatles, so you have to ask me questions too, as you will hear, about what interests me. But that's what we were there, but it was very intense to leave the culture we were in and head into this time of profound silence in a place that was so silent. I mean, your feet sunk into the ground when you stepped into Rishikesh. It was like no place I'd ever been. And it just enveloped you. But if you're not silent inside and you have turmoil, then that turmoil can start to sort of erupt and stand out. And that's part of what I was going through in India. I talk about it. Is that I had so much silence around me, and I was spending my time going deeper and deeper, that the turmoil and fears inside began to be pushed out and erupt. And that became very strong and overpowering for me. And I talk about it in the book. I talk about John's role. I mean, one of the things about John is that he was there for similar reasons to George and I. George wanted to give his life to awakening humanity, to bringing a better humanity to the world. And I can tell you from my own experience teaching people and doing yoga and meditation all these years, we can become much better than we are. And it's our duty, those of us especially who know it, we've got to do it. We've got to do it because people follow by example. So if we can show that we can be more to the young and to more people, then they'll pick it up. Words are empty if they're not backed up by that. But what George said is that he decided he would dedicate his life to this and that he would use his music to awaken people. And at that time he was studying the sitar with Ravi Shankar. And he was explaining to me about what I later found out was Gandharva Veda, about ragas. And that you could play certain ragas and it would put people in tune. So they start to feel the transcendent in themselves. Once you taste it, it's irresistible. And the reason it's irresistible is it's because it's yourself. It's your essence. It's your essence. And you asked me, what was it like meeting Maharishi? Well, you might think I'm crazy. It blew my mind. Unbelievable. And believe me, my mind was blowing a lot in those days. Well, this one went further. I met someone who was so adept in mining that transcendental part of themselves that the atmosphere, and this is why it was a martial art, it was considered the highest martial art because when a person lives silence, instead of stress and disharmony and dysfunction, when they're giving out silence and peace, that is disarming to people who are stressed or violent. It means that if somebody comes in the presence of one of these masters, they can't be violent. They are disarmed by that peace. You know, we talk about world peace, right? It's not the absence of violence, I promise you, because that violence will come right back. It is a state of being. It is transcendental. And that's what those of us from the 60s were dealing with. This powerful, what was invisible, trying to tell my mother about it, I mean, forget about it. But this invisible entity that could affect things, you could see it in your life, happening, changing, tuning you, and moving. So we're all emitting vibes, right? We all have vibes. But this is the most powerful vibe because the other ones are the lack of it. They come from the lack of it, meaning they come from the disorder that the lack of it creates. So when you bring it into this reality, it has a very powerful effect. And that's why we believed we could change the world. Now, when I met Maharishi, I have been trying to get to him, and very unsuccessfully for 2 years. And you'll read it in the book. But I finally that my time had come. And I came, and I came around into a room. I could feel his presence, blocks before I met him. But I was in denial. I was like, this can't be real. This can't be real. And then I came into the room where he was. He was sitting. There were about 15 people in front of him. And he was just listening to me. And the first thing I felt in that room, it was like being in a Category 5 hurricane of silence. It was so powerful. It was crackling all around me, maybe for miles. It was huge. I'd never, ever experienced anything like it. I don't care what trip I took. It was unbelievable, unbelievable. Totally fell apart. I totally fell apart. But as I was starting to fall apart, I saw him sitting there, and the thought went through my mind, I have never seen a human being so conscious, so involved. And then as I was falling in, I thought, but wait a minute, he's not doing anything. He was so conscious. He was aware of everything going on at the same time, but emitting this unbelievable presence. So that was something that I will say, I've met lots of famous people, I've done lots of things in my life, you'll see in the book, but I have never experienced anything as completely mind-blowing or changing as meeting Maharishi. Meeting a human being like that. I was a human being here. I wasn't in a dream. I wasn't stoned. I was in this presence. And it was phenomenal. But I saw that those of us who can't reach that, or maybe aren't able to, we can still have that influence. And we can do it together. I mean, before Maharishi died, a bunch of us asked him, who's going to replace you? What's going to happen when you're gone? He said, all of you will. All of you together will make the difference. We'll do it together. Maybe we won't be as enlightened, but together it's amplified. More of us doing this. More of us transcending. Transcending, that's a word that I didn't know what people were talking about when I heard that. Transcending? What is that? It just means going so deep inside that you enter that realm of the transcendent. And when you come out, you've opened that door. It'll never be the same. Your mind has found its way there. It imprints with it because that's what it's about. It's interesting. You think, and I remember when I was 18, wondering why I thought everybody at least me, should be happy. Because I looked around, there wasn't anybody happy, really. And I thought about the things I was looking for. Like, what was I looking for? Security. Everlasting love. No change. I was looking for things that don't exist out here. And I wondered, why am I looking for these things? They're not in our history books, they're not in our storybooks, our novels. Nobody has these things. And the world doesn't function that way. Why am I looking for these and thinking I should have them? Because that's your transcendental base or core whispering to you. It's directing you. It's directing all of us. We're looking for security. We're looking for that love that will never go away, that will fulfill us. We're looking for wholeness in relationships and things. Not going to get it, but we can get it inside. And that's what I meant by why we're here and where we're destined to be as human beings. If we make this journey by bringing that part of ourselves into this reality, we will have a world in peace. We will. We will, because we made it happen. But we have to do it. We have to do it. So enough people have to hear this message, want it. But as I said, it's irresistible, and this is why I love all the yoga teachers out there. Because even though they're not transcending like you can do in meditation, because in meditation, you're changing your perspective inside. Your mind is shifting its loyalties from constant change to your core, your center. But we can, through yoga, taste it. When people go into Shavasana or Shavasana, whatever you want to call it, for moments they are more subtle. They can feel the more universal parts of themselves in their world. The world has layers that we are oblivious to, that we need to wake up to. And we have the potential. It's like a light bulb that's 100 watt and it's been covered with all this dust. It has the capacity to be 100 watt. We just have to uncover it. We all have this capacity. So anyway, so let's go back to India. I'll tell you some crazy stories so that at least